Hi, Dionne the Tea Priestess here for you and me and a cup of tea. And I have got my trusty Hogwarts cup filled with this really lovely tea called Christmas in Paris. It's an herbal tea by Stash, and it's so delightful because it's kind of pepperminty, but it's also got like a chocolate in it. So it's very, 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 very nice, and I hope that I don't get any money from Stash, but I just love, love, love that they have little small sample packs of tea bags. Like for $3 or $4, you can get a 10 pack of tea bags that you can try. And with me today is the baby doggy. She decided that just before I pushed play, she decided she wanted to get up in my lap. So she might be popping her head up. She might not be popping her head up. That might be as far as she gets, just that little peek. Hopefully she won't bark. She has taken to barking at nothing outside like a dachshund do. So today, if you are joining me for the first time, thank you so much for your time. If you have joined me multiple times, thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate you. Let's start our time by taking a deep breath and checking in with that body. How you doing, body? Noticing how are you feeling, not trying to change it. And give yourself permission to pack up any thoughts that might be swirling around in your head. Permission to pick those thoughts back up after our time together or not. So glad you're here. So, I've been talking about my Vagabroad Journal with all of these beautiful, beautiful ladies, and this is my second book, but this is my current book. And I'm nearly done with this. It's averaging out to be about 3 months worth of writing for me. So that's fantastic. Anyway, I've been talking about them. I've been taking pictures of my journaling, and I've connected with Vagabroad Journal herself, Chimene, on Instagram, and she is delightful, absolutely delightful. So she had sent me some interview questions to do for her blog, and they were such rich, juicy questions that really, really got my juices flowing in a magnificent way. I answered so many of her questions that I was almost afraid that I was being extremely verbose, so I cut back on some of the questions and just sent her pieces, right? I sent her quite a few. But she was so excited about it. She said, please send me the rest. And I thought that maybe instead of just sending another set of questions in, I'd do a video and post it for you and for anybody who is looking at her blog as well. So as soon as I get the link for that interview, I will definitely drop it in the doodly-doo below. But today I'm going to answer 2 of those fantastic questions for you. So the one starting that I wanted to answer, she asks, how does perusing through old journal entries impact you? And there are 3 things that I notice when I go back through my old journals. And I don't do that a whole lot, but when I feel like I am in a down, dark place, or I'm going through a tough time, or it just seems like I'm not making any progress, that's the time that I like to go through my old journal, because it tells me, it's like actual physical evidence for those negative self-talk voices or those critical inner voices, that my journal acts as evidence that yes, I am changing. Yes, I am seeing things differently. I'm acting differently. Oh yeah, this was a time when it didn't seem like anything was going to get better, and it just felt like all I was doing was dumping pain and pain and pain and pain and pain. This was especially true after my mom had passed away. That journal is just so dense with just all the heavy emotions and everything that I was feeling, and it just felt like at that time, it felt like I would never get better. At that time, it just felt like, ugh, I am never going to feel better. I was just so crushed by my mom's passing that it just felt like it would never get better. But gradually, it started happening. I started noticing. And I don't think I would have noticed it, had been in as much attuned with it, had I not been journaling. So, when the days and the weeks and the months and the years started passing, then it was like, oh yeah, that was really hard. Oh yeah, there was some really challenging things that happened then, but I made it through. And what did I learn from that? So that's one way. You absolutely can start to pick the lessons that you learned up. You can start to see actual physical evidence in your own hand. And I think that is really, really helpful to see it from your own hand. I mean, it's nice to see to have people say, "Oh, you've changed," but to really have that confirmation for yourself from yourself, I think helps tremendously in stemming that looking to outside sources for validation. You have, but from writing down these incidents and then going back and looking at these things written down in your own hand, that really is self-confirmation that can just really make a tremendous difference in the way that you continue to show up in your own life. Especially when you find that you're wanting to give up, or like things just feel hard. Things just do feel hard sometimes. So to be able to have that is invaluable. Another thing that I notice when I go back and read my own journals is a lot of times I can see where I made an enormous decision, and it might not have seemed like an enormous decision when I wrote in my journal, but it might turn out to it. I've found that multiple times, little insignificant things that I made a decision on because I've journaled. And I tend to journal back in the day, years ago. I used to tend to journal like, if I had a choice, I would write down the pros and cons, especially if it was something that I was really back and forth and really feeling like, I don't know. Because the truth is, I do know. There's only two reasons that I'm putting out the I don't know. One is that I'm afraid of making that choice. Or two is that I haven't gotten quiet enough to listen to what my inner voice is saying is the best choice for me. Those are the only two reasons that I would say I don't know. More times than not, it's because I'm afraid of doing it. I'm afraid of moving forward. That just is something that is my default pattern. I default more to fear than to not listening to my inner voice. I'm afraid to do what my inner voice is telling me. And so to be able to look back at my old journals and go, oh, okay, that's where I made that choice. Okay, so what do I do next? It gives me kind of a benchmark to say, okay, here's a road marker on this twisty, windy path that is my life. And here's what's next. And then also the third thing about that is, I talked just a little bit about the default patterns, and that's the thing. When I notice that I am falling back into default patterns, then I can make a change. Now, the way that I teach with the elemental forces of the elemental forces of creation, the power of choice is one of the primary powers of spirit. Nothing can happen until you, the spirit that is you, makes a choice. And so what stops me from making a choice is falling into default patterns of being. Again, like I talked about, falling into the fear, saying I don't know because I'm actually afraid to do something. So sometimes it's so subtle and so insignificant that I don't notice that I'm falling into those default patterns. patterns of behavior. Sometimes it's obvious. Like, for example, if I'm writing that I'm having an argument with somebody, or I'm just feeling, there's like a certain feeling keeps coming up when I'm doing such and such, or when I'm engaging in things that are shadow comforts, like I am drinking a lot of black tea with a lot of sugar in it, or I'm eating a lot of sweets. Usually those are I've always been, until recently, I've always been in the habit of eating my feelings. So when I notice that I'm just mindlessly consuming a lot of cookies, it's usually because there's some big emotion that I'm not dealing with, and that's a default pattern. And so that's where going back and looking at my journals really helps me to kind of identify some of the big things that are coming up that I may not necessarily be conscious of. So I hope that is helpful to you. And then she had this other question, and she said, let's say it's been a while since you've kept a journal, or you're just starting to journal late in life. What are some ways you would suggest tea-stained women can collect themselves, collect their stories, their memories, as they commence or recommence their journaling journey? And this is a fantastic question, because this one is helpful for tea-stained women, but it's also helpful for anybody, okay? So there are a couple things that I love doing. If you are fortunate enough to have a box of pictures like I do, like I think anytime before the digital camera or before the iPhone started to gain in popularity, which for me that was like 70s and 80s, I have physical pictures. I have some physical pictures in the 90s, but probably that's about as far I go. So 70s, 80s, 90s, if you have pictures, or if you can print your pictures off, this would be helpful as well. So you would collect those pictures and let the pictures be the way to collect the stories. So perhaps you would look at a picture of you when you were a kid, and if you have that story, you know what the picture, what you know about what you were wearing in the picture, you know why that particular day was special. And the reason that I say 70s and 80s, because I know on some of the older pictures they used to put date stamps on it, so you could at least have a year guide. So you could start from there. There is also you could collect, because we have the internet, you can go and look at some of the major things that happened in a specific year, and you can begin to collect your stories from there. Looking at like the top 40 charts. I know for years and years and years, Casey Kasem was doing the American Top 40, and that was the thing to listen to hear all of the most popular songs. So going back through and collecting those, music and pictures and even food and scents, those kind of things will help to trigger your memory in ways that is just absolutely amazing, and you can begin your recollection journey from there if you want. Another way to start collecting your stories, and again, you could use pictures and things like this to help, is an exercise called the remembering exercise. And this is something that I learned through my priestess training. But you would write remembering, and maybe you would write remembering my birthday and the year, okay? Or you could even do this kind of as a wrap up, which I'm going to be doing fairly shortly here, because my birthday is at the end of April, and I do some kind of wrap up every April. So I would write remembering remembering 2016, or I would write remembering. So remembering D, which I call myself D. So remembering D at age 46, and then I would just write. I would make a list of just 1 or 2 words per number of different things that I want to remember about myself. And then from that list of 10, 15 words, right, I would circle one or two words that really felt like they had juice to them. And then I would write a sentence or two about those two words. And then you can continue that process. So for me, I'll talk a little bit more about that in April, how I do the remembering journal. But that could get you started. You could start remembering myself at 13, remembering my mom at such and such an age, remembering, did you have a favorite aunt, remembering my favorite aunt, remembering my favorite uncle, remembering my cousins. I mean, you can use this remembering exercise so many different ways, and just use it like as a popcorn stream of consciousness kind of writing. You could write the name of the person in the middle, or you can put the picture that you have in the middle and write down all the things you remember. I've done this with pictures of pets, and I've done this with pictures of my siblings, and for whatever reason I have a lot more memories, and I guess maybe it's because I'm about 4, almost 5 years older than my sibs. So maybe it's because I'm older, I have a lot more memories of a lot of things that happened in our childhood, connections to my grandparents and things that they don't. And so that helps to keep those family memories alive. So if you want to do that, that would be fantastic. And another reason, and I think this is super important, and the question became, why do you think it is so important for tea-stained women to write in a journal? And this, for me, is really paramount, okay? As women, our stories have been taken from us. As tea-stained women, our stories were silenced and taken from us. And we are in this unique position that we have vehicles, the journal, the computer, access to information. We have so much that is available to us so that, one, the voices of our ancestors can live through us, but two, so that we can be the voices that inspire the next. We need to be concerned about what are we leaving? What kind of legacy are we leaving? We don't know how things are going to inspire us, but we do know when we read books from other people how inspiring they were. I've read Maya Angelou books multiple times and been inspired. I know the power of the written word and how powerful it is and how inspiring it is and how life-changing it can be to read someone else's words, someone else's experience, and see your own experience reflected in their experience. And so even though I don't personally have any desire or even idea of being a published author, I do know that my books will be passed on to my daughter and my son and to any children that they have, or they might share them with someone else. I mean, you just don't know what can possibly happen. I think that it was a grave disservice to not allow women to pass their stories on, because women's stories are so powerful and so needed as a voice of balance in between the way that things get pushed around. We have had to make decisions as women that nobody knows, right? And just having these things as records, being able to see what kind of things that one, our ancestors endured, and two, what we've endured, who knows how that's going to affect the future. And myself personally, I really like the idea of being a Time Lord. So not only can I connect to the past by writing my words down, I'm going to connect to the future. And so therefore I become timeless. So I hope these things have helped you, and I hope that you will, again, take the time to read the answers to the other questions that I shared on Chimene's website. And if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.